There is something undeniably special about Studio Ghibli's movies, and more specifically, the films of Hayao Miyazaki. But what is it? It could be the beautiful animation, the strong female leads, emotional soundtracks, world building, the list goes on. This studio has somehow captured lightning in a bottle. But I think there is something that connects these movies and makes them so special. Something I'm going to call third way conflict resolution. What is the third way, you ask? Well, let's look at the first two ways for some context. When someone attacks you, there are two primal reactions, fight or flight. These are the first two ways. Dive headfirst into violence and retaliation, or retreat and do nothing. And I'd wager that these are the most common responses to conflict you see in stories. You have a hero, something bad happens, and they have to choose what to do in the face of conflict. Often the hero will choose flight first and refuse their call to the venture, and then eventually decide to fight, like we talked about in our video on first acts. We've seen it over and over again. The hero has to fight the bad guy to stop him from doing evil, and it always comes down to that last fight during the climax of the story. You can also see flight used in side characters to act as foils to the main character to make them look braver and more heroic. But what if there was another option? Not as violent as fighting, but also not following the loop of running away just to fight or flee the next time. Obviously, the main character can't just run away the entire time. But do they have to fight? The kind of conflict resolution Miyazaki often employs, the third way, represents the options that transcend that traditional binary. The character isn't going to fight, but they aren't going to flee either. They have to find another way to resolve conflict, and this can happen in plenty of ways. Let's take a look at Avatar: The Last Airbender. All 3 seasons of the show focus on Aang defeating the Fire Lord, but as that inevitable final battle grows closer, Aang realizes he can't do it. He can't kill the Fire Lord. It breaks his ethical code, but he can't run away either. To do so would allow Fire Lord Ozai to continue his war, and if Aang's friends continued the fight without him, they would lose. He's the only one that can defeat the Fire Lord. So what does he do? Aang uses the power gifted to him by the Lion Turtle to take the Fire Lord's bending away, instead of killing him. Aang found the third way. Real quick before we talk about how Studio Ghibli uses the third way, think about your favorite stories. Which ways do they choose? Leave a comment down below, and in 2 weeks we will pick our favorite comment and give them a month free of Campfire Blaze. Campfire Blaze is an all-in-one place to plan and write your story. Check out the link in the description to try it for free. Now, back to the video. Let's look at one of my favorite Studio Ghibli movies, Princess Mononoke. This film embodies the third way perfectly because it's the only option. The main character, Ashitaka, is cursed, and his curse feeds off hate and violence. He heads west to search for the source of his curse when he is pulled into a deadly conflict. Irontown and the animal gods of the surrounding forest are at war. Because of his curse, Ashitaka can't choose the first way. He can't fight or he'll die from his curse. So the next option, retreat. But that's also not so easy. His condition is tied to the conflict. So if he doesn't resolve this war, his curse will still kill him. So that leaves his only option, his third way. Create peace between the gods and Irontown. A common thread in stories that explore third way solutions is compromise and peace for both parties. To pull that off, it helps if both the protagonistic and antagonistic sides of the conflict are sympathetic. The audience should be rooting for both sides, or at the very least be able to understand their points of view. Princess Mononoke definitely frames the gods as being the good guys, which I use in quotes because third way stories often don't have strict good guys and bad guys. There are those protagonistic and antagonistic forces I mentioned, but that's a matter of perspective. Antagonist doesn't equal bad guy. It only means the force that opposes the perspective the audience follows. The gods of the forest and Ashitaka are the protagonistic force of the story, but they aren't good guys. They murder and commit acts of violence and become consumed by hate. Irontown and their leader, Lady Eboshi, also aren't bad guys. Yes, Eboshi destroys the forest and hunts the gods, but she isn't all bad. When we get to see the inside of Irontown, we see that she does all of this to make a better life for her people, which are former beggars, the morbidly sick, and women she saved from brothels. Eboshi's intentions are to provide a better life for her people, and that's a respectable position. Ashitaka can't let either group destroy the other, because at their core, their intentions, while flawed, are good. So both sides of the story are sympathetic, but what does the third way accomplish here? Beyond making a story with a more complex plot, it also affects the story's themes. Let's take a look at the other potential outcomes if Ashitaka had chose the other ways, and what those decisions say about the story. First, Ashitaka chooses to fight with the gods and defeats Irontown. The message here would be that nature is superior and more important than human life and progress. Preservation at all costs. Except for Ashitaka, who dies from his curse. Second, Ashitaka allies with Irontown and defeats the gods. That would imply that humans have some kind of right to dominate nature by way of technological progress. And again, Ashitaka's curse kills him. Third, Ashitaka abstains from the conflict and the gods win. That would send a message about nature's innate power to take back what it once held. Ashitaka dies when the curse takes hold. Remember that flight from war wasn't an option either. Fourth, Ashitaka abstains from the conflict and Irontown wins. The message here could be about man's ability to conquer or something along those lines. I don't know, Ashitaka dies still. The two scenarios where the hero abstains from conflict aren't really options because it makes the main character inconsequential. But having the hero in the conflict implies value judgments on the sides of that conflict. Whoever the righteous hero sides with will be interpreted as the good guys, while the other side are the bad guys. Obviously that breaks down with anti-heroes, but that's a whole other can of worms that we don't have time to cover in this video. Anyway, let's look at our third way outcomes. Ashitaka tries to make peace, but fails. This could imply that peace is impossible and the two forces are destined to fight forever. Pretty cynical, but hey, sometimes that's the message you're going for. Ashitaka also probably dies here. And then finally, Ashitaka tries and succeeds to make peace. This implies that nature and technology, the old way and the new way, don't have to oppose each other, but rather they can coexist. Before you leave a comment, I know that these implied messages from the conflicts I'm talking about are pretty reductive. Obviously, themes and implied value judgments about those themes rely heavily on the context that they're in. But what the main character does and how the plot resolves are huge parts of that because they affect how the audience perceives the theme. The key is that you find a way to resolve your conflict that doesn't end in one side dominating the other completely. That doesn't mean the character doesn't fight for what they believe in. The third way is about exploring a space between those two sides of the spectrum. Aang still fights the Fire Lord, but he doesn't win by killing him. Ashitaka refuses to fight for the most part, but succeeds by saving the forest spirit's life, which restores peace to the valley. Third way conflict resolutions not only make Miyazaki's plots more interesting, they also give him an outlet to explore the themes he wants to explore. Miyazaki is a self-proclaimed pacifist, so naturally his stories will explore the power of peace over violence, like in Princess Mononoke. You can see the same idea explored in Nausicaa of the Valley of the Wind. The stories are hilariously similar. You have the nature side with the toxic jungle that's spreading and killing people versus the empire that wants to destroy the toxic jungle, but through less than ethical means. The protagonist, Nausicaa, makes peace and finds a way to balance the two groups. Obviously, Miyazaki enjoys this tempered view on the relationship between people and nature, and I think that tempered view is part of what makes these movies so special. Often stories can reinforce the binary of good and evil. They set clear boundaries about who is good and who is bad, but things aren't usually so cut and dry in real life. In real life, people aren't good guys or the bad guys. People take complicated paths to get where they get, and often do what they do because they believe it's the right thing. Not to say there aren't objective evils in the world, like murder and genocide, but Miyazaki's films ask you to look at life beyond that binary of good and evil, which is a radical idea, but it shouldn't be, right? Stories that rely on the dichotomy of good and evil can misrepresent real life. They reinforce this binary reality that doesn't actually exist in like 99% of everyday circumstances. Miyazaki's films reject that idea. Even though his films are fantasy epics with gods, dragons, giant bugs, and alternate worlds, they touch on a fundamental truth you don't always see in popular media. Now, I'm not trying to demonize stories that use the good versus evil paradigm. Action movies don't have time to find the third way conflict resolution. When you go into an action story, you expect cool action, the protagonist to win, and that's fine. But as a writer, you should consider the other options that are out there and the opportunities they present. The most important thing is you should approach conflict in the way that best suits the story you're trying to tell. Third-way conflict resolutions can give you a path to level up the plot of your story, from something that's been done before to something special. Finding your hero's third way isn't a simple task though. It isn't always just about pacifism. Aang still fought. Ashitaka still fought. But the way they fought and what they fought for is what sets them apart. They refused to become subject to the wheel of violence and found their own way. It's easy to kill the antagonist, but it's hard to become friends with them. Although you might just find out that the work it takes is worth it. Thanks for watching. Hey, make sure you like and subscribe, and don't forget to leave a comment with an example of third way conflict resolution for a chance to win a full month of the Campfire Blaze suite for free. This video is written by me, Levi Johnson, with animations by Cole Field. Thanks again for watching. You're the best.